but we must be mindful that much more remains to be done.
Somali president hints of tough times as the European Union pledges millions for reconstruction. Facing the accuser, the first witness against Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto appears at the International Criminal Court. And rooting for al-Sisi, a campaign is launched to have military chief Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to run for Egypt's presidency. This is Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. Remaining bullish, Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta to target high-growth sectors to boost economy. And Nigeria Super Eagles upbeat over chances of clinching the ticket to Rio after a draw with Ethiopia. Rebuilding Somalia's agenda has been in the radar of the international community for a long time now, and conferences have been held to help the country gain stability. Our Mogadishu reporter Mohamed Hirmoge had an exclusive interview with the Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. He began by asking him what has been achieved so far from the pledges.
Recently we have a conference in London in May this year, and there was around $300 million pledged. The Somali government and the United Kingdom government to establish a team to make a follow-up of those pledges, and they are working very hard. We are expecting a very good amount of this money will come. The same is the one in Brussels. We are proposing a financial architecture whereby the pledges can be received, and we're expecting that a very good percentage of that pledge will reach Somalia. Somalia is a unique case. We hope it will not be the same as the practices of in many other parts of the world.
At what stage would you consider Al-Shabaab to have been defeated? And how long do you think that will take? 5 years? 10 years?
You see, the fight against Al-Shabaab was two phases, and I think the first phase is now concluding, but the second phase will be a bit tougher and longer. The first phase was a military fight, war, where specific frontiers, areas of Shabaab control it has been liberated from them. And now most of the major towns in Somalia has been liberated from Al-Shabaab. Now soon Shabaab controlled areas will not be there. There are pockets of areas that Shabaab is controlling now in Somalia, particularly in South and Central Somalia. Soon there will not be those areas. So that's one phase of the war that will end by that Al-Shabaab as a fighting force will not be there soon.
Reports from AMISOM on activities against Al-Shabaab have dried up in recent months. Has AMISOM effectively stopped its offensive against Al-Shabaab in taking new areas?
No, it's not. AMISOM, they are a bit overstretched, and they lack some equipment and some, what they call it, the force multipliers. That's at least the reasons that they told us, and they are working. We are also supporting them to get those necessary facilities and equipment in order to fight and expand. But for us, as a Somali government, we are more focused on building Somali National Army, and we're building on that. Soon we will see Somali National Army that fighting by their own with AMISOM and without AMISOM.
Well, donors met in Brussels Monday to once again raise funds for Somalia, and previous funds earmarked for vital projects have either not been received or the implementation process has now been painfully slow. Mohamed Hirmoge tells us more.
A summit that's focused on peace and nation building, drawing up a 3-year program to nurture Somalia's recovery with funds pledged for health, water and education. But this is not the first time Somalis have had such pledges. There was an international Somali conference in London in February 2012, another in May this year where $300 million were pledged. Critics question what's happened to the money that was promised then. Some suspect much of the money is channeled through aid organizations.
When these funds come through international organizations, more than 50% goes to logistics and facilitation. What remains at the end of the day is 20%, which is not enough to implement projects.
The conferences so far have led to no obvious new projects in Mogadishu. The president is hoping the international community can remedy this.
We are proposing a financial architecture whereby the pledges can be received, and we're expecting that a very good percentage of that pledge will reach Somalia. Somalia is a unique case. We hope it will not be the same as the practices of in many other parts of the world.
Donor countries say Mohamud's government must show it has the capacity to spend the money properly.
But we need the political class of Somalia to understand that its responsibility is to its own people to create the conditions and a functioning state. Otherwise, that investment will never occur, and nor will it ever succeed.
It's clear that there's a lot of goodwill towards Somalia, and there's agreement that rebuilding is a priority. But Somalia and its foreign supporters still have to find a way to turn words into action. Mohamed Hirmogi, CCTV, Mogadishu.
And we'll take a short break here on Africa Live, but coming up. Facing the accuser, the first witness against Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto appears at the International Criminal Court. And rooting for al-Sisi, a campaign is launched to have military chief Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to run for Egypt's presidency. We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need a trade justice.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto arrived in the Netherlands on Monday for the resumption of his trial by the International Criminal Court at The Hague. The Deputy President, alongside radio journalist Joshua Arap Sang, is facing murder charges, deportation and persecution related to the 2007-2008 post-election violence. Now, media reports say the prosecution has lined up to 10 witnesses between Tuesday and October the 4th, when the trial chamber adjourns for a week. The first prosecution witness takes the lead on Tuesday. Lead prosecution counsel Anthony Steinberg had indicated that they would call up to 22 victims and witnesses who will describe the attacks in the towns of Tarbo, Kapsabet and Nandi Hills, and 5 locations in the Greater Eldoret region. Lawyers familiar with the operations of the International Criminal Court say the public may not be able to see the witness, but the rest of the parties will. Now, Rwandans voted in parliamentary elections on Monday, with the Central African nation's leader Paul Kagame predicting a solid win for his ruling Rwandan Patriotic Front. The Rwandan Patriotic Front has dominated Rwanda since ousting Hutu extremists and extending the genocide nearly 20 years ago, and has overseen the country's dramatic transformation from trauma to economic success. Analysts say the RPF faced no serious opposition. Only a handful of small parties or independent candidates were hoping to scrape a few seats in parliament, as prominent opposition figures remain sidelined. Voting was marked by orderly lines outside booths draped in the sky blue, green and yellow of the Rwandan flag, with some playing music. Turnout in Rwanda, where some 6 million people were eligible to vote in the poll, is normally high. Counting started promptly when voting ended in mid-afternoon, with the first result in one bureau in the capital showing the RPF leading by a wide majority. Now we return to our headline story on Somalia, where donors from several African and European countries met Monday in Brussels to approve a new deal for Somalia, with the European Union pledging another $870 million to help drive its recovery from 20 years of bloody civil war. The European Commission President said the European Union had already provided aid worth $1.6 billion, and the new commitment showed it would remain engaged with Somalia as it lays the foundation for the future. CCTV's Maria Galang has more.
As Somalia struggles to gain status as a fully fledged member of the international community, a lot still needs to be done in regards to security and human rights issues. International donors hope this new deal will be a big stepping stone to help drive the country's recovery from 20 years of bloody civil war.
But we must be mindful that much more remains to be done. Somalia should possess a fully fledged constitution reflecting a broad national consensus on how we wish to govern ourselves.
As the meeting opened, EU Foreign Affairs head Catherine Ashton urged the international community to support President Mohamud as he is faced with one of the most difficult challenges in the world.
I don't underestimate the challenges that lie ahead. You, Mr. President, have always understood how complex and challenging this will be. And this compact on its own will not resolve everything. But it gives us a plan, it gives us a set of commitments that will enable us to be focused on what we do.
Mohamud highlighted 4 priorities among many: security, legal reform, public finances and economic recovery. Meanwhile, Somalia's hardline Islamist al-Shabaab rebels dismissed the conference as a waste of time, saying, quote, "The billions promised will most likely be unpaid. The paltry sum given to the apostates," it said, using its term for the Somali government, will be lost in corruption. Between 2008 and 2013, the European Union provided $1.6 billion in aid, half of it to development and half for security. Most security funding went to the African Union mission in Somalia, comprising some 17,000 troops. The peacekeeping mission was launched in 2007 with UN Security Council approval. In recent months, however, several deadly al-Shabaab attacks have dented confidence, and observers wonder whether this new deal will deliver this time round. Maria Galang, CCTV.
Let's take a look at other stories making the headlines across the continent at this hour. A group of professionals and former army officers in Egypt on Monday launched a petition urging the country's military chief, General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, to run for president just 2 months after he ousted the first elected leader. The campaign for General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is propped up by a pervasive personality cult based on his success in uprooting an Islamist ruling elite and highlights the yearning for a strong man to take charge after nearly 3 years of turmoil. Elsewhere, the United States has refused entry to the president of Sudan to attend a UN meeting next week. The United States says he should face charges of war crimes and genocide at the International Criminal Court. Omar Hassan al-Bashir is accused of masterminding genocide and other crimes during a conflict in Sudan's Darfur region. As the United Nations host country, the United States has a policy of issuing visas for members of delegations regardless of disputes with individual countries. However, Washington does sometimes refuse entry to government officials and professionals from Iran, with which it has had no diplomatic ties since 1980. In Mali, protesters threw stones at officials from the newly elected government during a weekend visit to the main northern rebel stronghold. The government said last week it would hold discussions with all of the groups living in the turbulent north of the country before opening peace talks with Tuareg rebels. Pro-rebel demonstrators, angered that the government was visiting the town before launching peace talks, initially tried to occupy the airport runway to block their arrival, but were dispersed by African peacekeepers. And stay with us here on Africa Live as still ahead on the program. Remaining bullish, Kenya's Uhuru Kenyatta to target high-growth sectors to boost economy. And we return to Kenya, where the government has announced plans to target high-growth sectors to rebalance and strengthen its strong economic performance to date. And like most developing countries across the world, Kenya's economy has rebounded since the global economic slowdown, supported by strong reforms and a favorable environment for doing business. And that was the commentary coming out of the opening of a high-level conference on Tuesday, focusing on Kenya's economic outlook under the theme Ready for Takeoff. The meeting outlined the country's economic successes, prospects and challenges experienced so far. And speaking at the event, President Uhuru Kenyatta noted that Kenya will build more on its strengths and also look into ways of targeting high-growth sectors like agriculture and tourism. Now, Egypt wants to encourage foreign oil companies in the country to increase exploration and production in exchange for a more rapid repayment of the $6 billion that it owes them. Finance Minister Ahmed Galal told Reuters news agency that the government also plans to repay between $363 million and $580 million in arrears owed to local contractors by mid-October. The plan is to schedule the debts in a way that gives the companies a level of liquidity that allows them to invest and step up exploration to boost production. Galal said that he had been meeting regularly with the oil minister and governor of the central bank to work out where the money will come from and tie the payments to a long-term program to encourage alternative energy investment as a means of getting state subsidies under control. Authorities and businessmen from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have met in Abidjan for the Invest in Côte d'Ivoire Forum. Côte d'Ivoire is the second largest economy in the West African region after Nigeria. The country is just coming out of the effects of a decade of political instability. Côte d'Ivoire is also the strongest economy of the West African Economic and Monetary Union and represents a third of the union's GDP. Côte d'Ivoire has adopted a new economic and social policy that should see it achieve an emerging economy status by the year 2020. It hopes that the forum, among other events, will showcase its advantage and investment opportunities.
We aim to do more than we did in 1999. This year, we want to gather more than 2,500 investors in Côte d'Ivoire and exceed the amount of 80 billion francs, which we recently reached.
This is a great opportunity for me. This initiative was implemented by Côte d'Ivoire since 1995 and it was halted. I think the current political environment enables to relaunch this initiative, which allows mobilizing investors from all over the world to work with national and sub-regional economic operators.
Women's rights activists in Uganda hold that science and technology fields are dominated by men, with women being confined to the arts. But as CCTV's Isabel Nakiria tells us, it is possible for women to succeed in technology, as demonstrated by one of them, Terry Birungi.
Card games in Uganda are not often thought of as a profession, but one Ugandan woman is earning a living from them, inventing a card game application for Android and Windows phones. She named it Matatu, the Ugandan name for card games.
The first time Matatu was in the Play Store, it was all just an experiment. Can we get local games and try to replicate the same idea and put it on digital? And we had about 2,000 downloads during the time, which was very impressive because we had not done any advertising.
The Matatu game is growing in popularity, and this fan says it reminds her of her childhood. It's also become a popular way for big corporations to advertise.
It was one of my favorite games when I was growing up. I used to play it with my cousins a lot, and I was glad that I could still play it even if I wasn't physically with my friends or my family, but I could still play it on the phone.
The government is trying to raise the numbers of young women who go to university, but those that do tend to avoid the sciences.
The way the society is changing, technology and all, you have to be able to work with all this change, and with that kind of passion and attitude, I've been able to work with it. And
IT specialists say more women need to be empowered and encouraged into these fields. Birungi says she is inspired by women such as the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, and Marissa Mayer, the president of Yahoo. But if more Ugandan women are to make their marks in this field, campaigners say much more needs to be done to ensure it does not remain a men-only industry. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
Let's now take a look at how the market we are tracking performed in early trade today. The Nigerian All Share Index lost 0.65%. The Johannesburg Securities Exchange All Share in Johannesburg was 0.10% weaker. The NSE 20-share index in Nairobi traded 0.82% inside negative territory. Egypt's EGX 30 was posted 0.34% in the south. Sports headlines coming up next. Your headline. Nigeria Super Eagles upbeat over chances of clinching the ticket to Rio after a draw with Ethiopia. Stay with us.